All right, folks, welcome to another episode of Subject Matters, where we bring you behind the scenes in our editorial process, really getting down to the nitty gritty of each topic that we're doing this week. This is Dylan, my co founder. I'm Ben. We do the writing. Our editing team does the editing, and we do the talking. All right, Dylan, last week was your pick.
Right.
This week was my pick in terms of topics. We've sort of been going back and forth like this. I think pretty much splitting topics evenly. This week was honestly inspired by a little bit of student debt outrage that hit me.
I was gonna say I was surprised that you brought this up rather than me.
Um, I forgot what I was listening to or watching, but then it spurred me on to this, and now I was just on a rampage. And I sort of like wrote out this like rough draft
Hmm.
spiel that I sent to you guys and was like, hey, we should talk this out. So, regardless, this week we're going to be talking about colleges as businesses and brands. Now, let me hit you with the premise here, and sort of mentioned this in my rough draft, but I think there are three college experiences that are happening right now, and
Okay.
this is again very broad. So
Okay.
I'm sure there's people that say I don't necessarily fit into it, but this is the three that I think. I think there is the college student who goes to state school or community college, working part time or full time, paying their way through, and is going to get a skill and a certification that is going to then directly impact their job. They're going to become a certified nursing assistant. They're going to become a mechanic.
Sure.
They're going to become something else, or a technical school. They'd be going to technical school, and this is going to directly impact their income.
Okay.
There's the category that I personally fall into, and I'd be curious to see if you think this is the case with yourself as well. Where I went to like a middle of the way state school or private school. I paid a ton of money for a bachelor's degree, and then basically banking on that piece of paper, the degree itself, landing me a middle income job, which wasn't going to be able to afford the loans that I took out to pay for the piece of paper, anyways.
Sure.
And then the third, which I think is actually the most interesting, is I'm going to call it the quote unquote elite education. We're in the Northeast right now, so we think of Yale, Harvard, Princeton's, New Jersey, Columbia, these types of places that are very expensive, but the students that are going there are going for the brand. And the reason I say this is I've actually taken courses at the online public Harvard website. So they video record their classes, like actual Harvard classes, post it online. You can take them for free. I don't know that there was a tremendous difference between the quality of that education or lecture that I was watching
Sure.
and my Southern Connecticut education. The difference is when you attend Harvard, you get to say, I went to Harvard. And I think there's an interesting dynamic. Sorry to grandstand here for a second. But the cool thing is actually not to attend Harvard, but to drop out of Harvard, which gives you a they want me, but I didn't need them dynamic. So it's not actually the piece of paper that these people are after, right? Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, Elon Musk, I don't think went to Harvard, but he dropped out of Stanford, maybe? I'd have to look it up. But he didn't graduate.
Right.
And there's a couple other really notable entrepreneurs, big business people out there. And basically, if you listen to any of them speak about dropping out of school, they basically all said, what I was learning in class was not applicable to my real life ideas and businesses or career path. And therefore I was wasting my time. Now, I get to put on my resume that I attended Harvard, and that's going to get me a meeting with a whole bunch of investment bankers or venture capitalists or whoever, and I'm going to put that on the resume. So,
Right.
elite education using the brand, middle of the way education taking out tons of debt to get a piece of paper, and then, what do we want to call it? Community college type education, practical education, obtaining some sort of certification. Your thoughts?
I think that I would fall into the same category as you in terms of like the middle type of education. I go to a private university. I do agree that you could probably fit most students' experiences into some. I mean, like you said, not everybody is going to fall into those categories. You could put subcategories within those categories that people would fall into.
Sure.
I do think it's interesting, with people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and Zuckerberg. Like you see those types of people that are able to go to an elite type of school, drop out, and then still become successful. Right. You have to go into a very specific type of occupation to do that. You need to be an entrepreneur.
Sure.
You won't see any practicing physician in the lawyer in the United States that dropped out of college and is a lawyer, because that's not possible.
Yeah. But why?
Because it's a requirement to have that piece of paper that you've talked about.
Right. Because they have that certifying board that says you have to do something. And I think for professions like the healthcare professions or law, things like that, governing bodies, generally a good thing to have, yeah.
Sure. So, yeah, I will say, obviously I can't speak for the level of education that you would get at one of those types of schools because I've never attended one. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that it is not extremely... I would imagine the difference isn't extremely significant to warrant the price difference, nor the status change that comes along with attending one of those schools.
Well, and let's clarify something too, because this is part of the problem that we're talking about, is our middle level education that you and I are getting is not that far in price from that elite education as well.
Right. Yeah,
and that's a huge problem.
Definitely. Yeah, that's true. And you also see a lot of the students that are attending these schools, because they are the top students, the most achieved, they are getting scholarships. So they may be there. For example, I have a friend that I went to high school with, that I've grown up with, that goes to Brown for free.
There you go.
So, and I'm paying what I pay to go to a, I guess, quote unquote, lesser, established institution. So, yeah, I don't know. I think you're not necessarily only paying for the brand of those schools. You're paying for more. Obviously, they're more funded.
Sure.
I will agree that the name itself does give it the pull that you say it gives, but you have to take into account the people that work there. The professors. I don't know if it's necessarily the level of education, but the prestige of the staff members that are.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because let's talk about the prestige of the staff members.
I think your audio's cutting out.
Can you hear me?
A little bit. No, it's good. Never mind.
So yeah, no worries. So let's talk about the prestige of the staff members, though, because what is that based off of? That's based off of their independent research that they're doing basically on behalf of the university, right? Harvard or Stanford or whoever wants, ex-physicist to do his research at their university, so they can say Harvard professor publishes, groundbreaking research, blah, 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 right? So you're actually paying for them to make their own name back into that, sort of brand cycle, for lack of a better word. What's interesting, so we are starting our media company. A little bit of your education is applying to this? I mean, you are. Can I tell the people? Can I tell the
Yeah.
people you're a business major?
Yeah. Well, no,
Right.
I'm not a business major. I go to a
Business
school.
school. Sorry. Right. Um, so have you ever taken an online course outside of school?
No.
How to code, how to make a video, how to do this, how to do that.
Nope.
So
Well,
this
I will say I don't know. I know you mentioned it in what you sent out previously. Not necessarily a strict course based on a website, but like YouTube
sure
tutorials and stuff like that
sure
could be classified under the same umbrella. So sure.
yeah, absolutely. So the reason I bring this up is I think the premise of this week is really a cost benefit analysis of college, and that's sort of the meat that I want to get down to. The driving force, so I work in healthcare, you work in healthcare. The driving force here for us is the certification, right? The governing body needs to certify us. The only way they'll do that is if we have a college degree, graduate degree,
Right.
medical school education, whatever it may be. And so the university is essentially the gatekeeper of that opportunity, and
Yeah.
they know it.
Absolutely.
That being said, healthcare, law, teaching, off the top of my head, are the only professions that I can think of right away that really require that gatekeeper type certification with the governing body, licensing test, vet, fine, whatever. So health. I'm sure I'm missing some, but my point is, if you want to be a business person, you want to be a content creator, a software developer, an entrepreneur, a writer, any of these other things, anything creative, you don't need the piece of paper, the diploma, to
Okay.
be what you want to be. What you need is the knowledge and the skills.
Right.
And I think these online courses, if we can get employers to recognize that, then these online courses or independent courses and programs might be the great equalizer. If we can just get, if you're going to go work at or write for your local news source and you've taken umpteen courses on writing but don't have a bachelor's degree, if we can get that news source to just acknowledge that you've self-taught and shown the discipline to obtain those skills,
Yeah.
then that actually benefits the potential employee a lot because they didn't have to pay for a 4-year degree in literary art or whatever it is.
Right.
Thoughts?
That's true. Yeah, and I think that another option would be getting universities to realize that the more practical way of self-directed learning is the way that a lot of people are starting to learn you can go. I think a big problem that my generation is having is the fact that it was very heavily enforced to us that we had to go to college.
Right.
If you don't go to college, you're a failure, which is
was the message that you were sort of given.
Right, basically. Because if you don't go to college, what are you going to do with your life? And the whole self-directed or technical school, learning to become a plumber or an electrician or something like that was never enforced.
Enforced or encouraged.
Yeah.
Right. And just
so
so just to be clear, it's not that we're looking down on these professions. This is what your high school guidance counselor tells you.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I'm not looking down on the professions at all. I'm saying that they make a significant amount of money, more so than a lot of people can get with a college degree.
Right.
I have an article pulled up from Northeastern University with the median salaries based on education level. So, high school diploma median salary. This was based on data from 2019, I believe. 38,792 median salary for a high school
Okay.
graduate.
Okay.
Some college with no degree is 43,316. Associate degree is about 3,000 more than that. And then there's a significant jump to a bachelor's degree from 46,000 to 64,000.
Interesting.
So then the gap between high school and bachelor's is nearly double.
Sure.
Despite the fact that somebody can go out of high school, get into an apprenticeship with one of those professions I
Trades.
mentioned previously,
Right.
and make more than $64,000 a year once
Sure.
the apprenticeship is over.
Sure. Sure.
So
Well,
I-
and so I think it's also worth noting, sort of tag on that. I also have some statistics here. So the median income over time
Mm.
has not changed that much.
Right.
So you're comparing levels of education to the income, but I'm saying
Mhm.
that bachelor's degree income from
Yeah.
1980s to now has not changed that drastically.
Right.
However, the tuition cost, the chart I'm looking at now shows, I think it's an average per course of, it used to be 2,500, now it's 6,500, so triple.
Right.
Whereas the income has not reflected that. And
Right.
I in my sort of spiel and draft that I had sent you, I talk about my own granted graduate experience. When I started graduate school, it was $500 a credit. 3 years, my final year when I graduated, it was $1,500 a credit.
Wow.
I didn't get 3 times more classes, 3 times more professors, 3 times more meals in the cafeteria, whatever it is, 3 times
Sure.
more degrees. I have a hard time justifying that. I think it's insane.
I do agree. I think it's been interesting to see a more there's been a political movement recently,
Sure.
and it's been a platform that a lot of politicians have run on now, in terms of eliminating the student debt crisis, changing how colleges, like required certain tuitions, like free. There have been suggestions of free tuition for
Right.
college. I think it's interesting that governments have definitely tried to pursue some type of experiment with that. I know in Rhode Island, there was an initial goal to make state schools free. So that would be Rhode Island College and URI, and then also CCRI.
Does URI fall into that? I mean, whatever, semantics. but-
URI, Rick, and CC were all supposed to fall under that.
Oh, okay, interesting.
By the time the policy was actually passed, it was just CCRI. Because URI and Rick were basically like, absolutely not.
No, we're all set.
Because they were concerned that the funding that they would receive would not equal what they're getting in tuition.
Right.
Which is absolutely true. But it goes to show why is that? What did the government not offer them that they're getting out of tuition? Because I do find it somewhat concerning that whatever they were offered by the government wasn't enough for them. Like, I don't know. I'm sure any research that you would go out and try to find about stuff like that would say, oh, it doesn't provide us enough to reinvest into the campus structures for student safety or
Right.
for education programs and everything like that. But I
sort of disagree with with that premise, with that fictional argument from the
right.
universities.
Yeah.
Because if it's a state school, right? My brother, went to UConn. I went to state school in Connecticut. Someone somewhere in the local government, has the budget of what it actually costs to run the facility, pay
Right.
the teachers,
Right.
Accomplish this, right? So.
Right.
But I think what's interesting on that point is, and you see this much more with private schools now, though, is private school as a brand, but also as a investment business. So these schools are growing their endowments, they're investing it back into hedge funds, things like that.
Sure.
It's no longer the education business;
Yeah.
it's the business.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree, and I also disagree with that hypothetical situation
Right.
or hypothetical argument that I gave, and that I think a big problem too that we need to look at is the executives of these schools.
Sure.
Because I think something that you'll notice if you look at almost any school, you have like a president that
Yeah.
makes, however, in the millions.
Sure.
But then you have these absolutely ridiculous subdivisions. So like you'll go from like president to like vice president to like executive vice president of like
student affairs.
yeah, of
this, that, and
student
the other
affairs,
things.
and then like diversity division, and
Right.
then you know,
Right.
and then branching off of that, and it just gets so small, and you wonder how much these executives are being paid to come in and oversee such a small. Obviously, the example I gave is an important one.
Sure.
But there are plenty that I could probably look up on my school's website right now that I would
Right.
question exactly what it is they do.
Right. Does the associate director of housing need to be making $300,000?
Right.
I don't know.
Or the executive vice secretary to the associate director of housing. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's hilarious.
So it does it concerns me a little bit, and I think that students are afraid to bring up, and obviously I probably should be, to bring up stuff like that because of any potential, pushback or repercussions that they would get from their school.
Right.
Granted, I will say the university that I attend is absolutely beautiful. The amount of money that's gone into the aesthetic of the campus, which then would draw in more students, which in turn would draw in more successful students.
In theory.
In theory, right, is very high. The aesthetics are great. I love the campus.
How much? Let's talk about this. How much of the college experience? What are you willing to pay for it?
Right. That's basically what the problem. That's what we're talking about here, right?
Right.
At what point are people going to look at college tuition and say that's not worth it?
Right.
I think a lot of people are looking. I think a lot of people started looking at that, and then loan companies and other sources of loans came out and made it disgustingly easy to get a student loan.
So this is I actually have a soapbox about this. So I'm going to just put it out there. I have $250,000 of student debt. That's from my, again, humble brag, a couple undergrad degrees and a graduate degree, right? Which was required by the board of certification of my chosen profession. We prosecuted the big banks for predatory lending to people who could not afford a mortgage. Now, those in 2007. Now, those were people with jobs and families and could prove an income and had a tangible asset. And the world was outraged that we gave them interest rates of 6 to 8% and were variable. And that was like atrocious. But now you're going to tell me it's okay for student loan companies to give 18-year-old Ben Velarde $250,000 with no degree, no job prospects, no business plan going forward. You're basically like, yeah, bank on it, and if not, we'll take everything you own. Don't worry, we'll get it back. And we're going to make your rate higher than those mortgage rates were when everyone was outraged about it and the variability of it. How is that not predatory lending? That I don't understand.
I completely agree. And the thing with student loans is that they're the most impossible loans to get out of.
Right.
Take like it is very hard to refinance a student loan within that same company. Like obviously you can take out a private loan, pay off your student loans and negotiate with your other provider of the loan from there. But the company that initially provided you the loan is like tough.
Yeah.
Like
you signed. Oh well.
There were some that had some like forgiveness with COVID, which was very surprising to me.
Well, forgiveness, so they just paused. Well, the federal government made the
forgiveness
mandate
in the form of you don't have to pay us while you're not working, which is thank you.
Yeah, right. I wasn't going to anyways.
Bountiful God, thank you very much. I will. So like I don't know how much but it was helpful. But I mean, basically the only way that like your federal debt goes away with student loans is when you die.
Yes.
So I
So
don't know how we fix that.
So I've looked into it a little bit. I almost wonder, and granted, this is not financial advice to anyone listening out there. I almost wonder if you're a 22-year-old person who doesn't need a mortgage right away or a car loan, if it is better to default and declare bankruptcy on your student loans, let them take your used car, let them take your laptop, declare bankruptcy, your credit score will be, very low for a little while. Get a job, buy a used car back, buy your laptop back, and rebuild your life from 22 to 30 when you're ready to get a mortgage, and avoid paying your loans. I don't think it works out quite that well in the end.
I think for the vast majority of recently graduated students, that would probably not be the ideal scenario.
Sure. But it says something. It says something that you we're considering it, right?
Right. That's what I was just going to say that exact same thing. The fact that is like a possibility, like it might work for some people, honestly, is very sad.
I do want to get back a little bit to this idea of these sort of elite brand name schools.
Okay.
Because I was thinking about it, and I wrote about this a little bit. Is what are we really saying about the people that go there? And granted, I was not that great of a high school student. I was average.
Sure.
But basically, what we're saying about the people that are going to the elite brand schools is they're basically that 15-year-old who had the discipline at 15 to study on the bus more, or wasn't, in our case, texting with friends all night. Or are we saying it's that 17-year-old whose mom and dad paid for SAT prep and then forced them to go on Saturday? So I guess my point here is, are we saying that the reflection of who you are as a 15-year-old is indicative of your job prospects as a 23-year-old?
Right. I will say I do enjoy that your cat has become a guest host on this episode.
The cat is going insane. He's like, don't pay the debt. Don't pay the debt.
I was going to say, obviously the cat has very strong feelings about this particular topic.
More catnip. More catnip.
I think that's an interesting point that you bring up. Are you also saying that then the people that don't go to those schools are not worthy of the jobs that the people that go to those schools end up getting? I don't know. And that is definitely not the case. From a social standpoint, there are certainly people that do not end up going to elite schools that deserve more prestigious jobs. That may not get it solely on the base of the school that they went to.
Let me pose this to you. You're now co-owner of a business.
Right.
Say we grow, and we need to hire a mobile developer, a marketer, whoever. Mm-hmm. Who would you rather have? The 22-year-old who just graduated from Harvard, degree in search engine optimization and marketing.
Okay.
Or the 24-year-old who's been working while taking online courses and putting themselves through these independent courses, maybe built a little bit of a brand for themselves, has some real life experience, basically displayed this level of hustle, and is now a candidate. I think that's not something to be frowned upon. That's probably pretty valuable.
So yeah, I agree. I would probably pick the second person in that situation. Depending, I think the key factor here is that person's ability to market themselves. That is mostly because of the fact that I would assume at this point most businesses would look at those two resumes and basically have made up their minds by the time the candidate walks in the door.
Right.
So
Right, because the one's on that Harvard letterhead.
right. And so I think it is solely dependent on the candidate's ability to market themselves in that situation. If the Harvard grad walks in, flushes over his words, his tie is backwards, you know, and then
Sure.
this self-starter comes in, markets himself, talks about his experience with why he didn't go through the traditional course
Sure.
of getting into that job, and does it in an eloquent way. Obviously, you have to hire that person. I think.
So in your interview, are you asking, do you have a college degree? Say you put them through say they're going to be a software developer, and you put them through a bunch of tests. You're like, come in with a prototype app, and they both come in with like an identical-ish app, and they like have accomplished this goal, demonstrated their skill. You even going to ask if they have a college degree?
In a case like that, no. I don't know if it's necessarily something that you just don't have to ask. Because I think that there are, out of the people that don't go to college, there are people that don't go and become successful, but there are also people that don't go that do not. And are not self-starters.
Sure.
And that's why they didn't go to college, because they knew that even after they got their college degree, they were not going to be successful in whatever they ended up majoring in.
Right.
So I don't know if it's necessarily just negligible information. But I think what we're proposing here, which is the difficult part, is that we need to have a fundamental change in the way that businesses take on new employees.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that we may see that, especially with my generation and even the younger generations, now that entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, are becoming so prevalent and becoming such media figureheads of this is the path that you can also take. I think that's what the population really needed to realize I don't need to go to college to be successful. Mm-hmm. Because again, that is the message that my generation received.
Sure.
And maybe not in those words. Nobody ever specifically said to me, you have to go to college, but the connotations put on the occupations that could be obtained through not going to college were not very good ones.
Sure. Now, and now, correct me if I'm wrong too, though. And it was largely my experience through I went home and had to teach myself the stuff anyways.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
I sat in lecture. It was boring as all get out. I didn't really learn anything. And then I had this big test on Friday. I had to go teach myself, my own way anyways.
Yeah, my college courses, my college professors encourage that, which kind of confuses me. So is college now encouraging you? So are them doing that, right? Are encouraging you to self-start? Is that them trying to get you into this new idea that we're talking about? So they're basically saying, this is why you didn't need to go to college. Yeah. You can teach yourself everything on your own. Right. I think that's very interesting. I think that it's a great skill to learn, being able to go and teach yourself something. I don't know that you need to go to college to do it.
And pay for it, right?
And pay for it, yeah.
Are you going to go to a restaurant and have the chef be like, cook yourself the meal and then serve it to yourself? and then pay him? That's essentially what we're saying, right?
It is. That's why I laughed. It's a comical comparison, but
But they're the gatekeepers, right? As long as jobs require that bachelor's degree or whatever it is, they're the gatekeepers. Super, super frustrating for students everywhere, I think.
I agree. So I don't know if there's any other big topic that you wanted to touch on in this conversation that I'm just completely going to change gear on. I don't know if you wanted to bring that up before I do so.
Yeah, no. Flip it
So when you first sent me the topic, without reading the article, colleges are brands, or like branding in college, my first thought was college athletics. I don't know how much time you have to talk about this here, but so I initially thought that we were going to be talking about college athletics, because I know that for a very long time there was outrage among the students because student athletes do not and are not allowed to get paid.
Sure.
For their likeness, for their performance, for anything. Granted, there's been multiple stories that have come out that the recruiters for those teams, like, whatever, Alabama or Duke or, all these
Sure.
schools were like, if you come here, there may be certain incentives.
Right. Right. And then
That was under the
there's a
table type
car
of stuff.
waiting
But
for them. Right.
the NCAA was very against that.
Sure.
I don't know what your feelings are on that topic, but that was what I initially thought that we were going to be talking about here. Not that I don't think that the other topic was important. That was just the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah. So I initially had a very unpopular opinion. I initially was like, recent graduate school graduate, tons of debt, loan payments coming due.
Sure.
And so is getting like a full ride to play with the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And I was like, you know what? I don't even think they should get paid. They're getting a full free education that I couldn't get.
Right.
Even though I would argue, providing healthcare to people is ultimately going to benefit society more than playing football.
Right.
I was super frustrated about that. My tune changed a little bit because if you want to be, and we talk about being a self-starter, if you want to go out and sign, or if Nike is willing to pay you to sell your jerseys, and you're willing to enter, like, that is a valuable lesson for these young athletes, to get to be into business, to learn how that works, royalties, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to be a self-starter and someone else wants to pay you for that, I think by all means. Do I think that you should go to college for free, have the University of Alabama pay you on top of that? Probably not. The pay you're making is $250,000 to go to Alabama for 4 years and get a college education. Oh, you disagree? Hit me. Yeah,
I do disagree with that, only because I mean, and this may be a stereotype as well. The quality of the education of a student athlete is not typically up to par.
Whose fault?
I would not the athlete.
Oh, I think it's a culture thing that's totally accepted. Watch the documentary One and Done about Ben Simmons. This like made me so angry. So Ben Simmons is a basketball player, came from Australia to go to college here. I think he went to Louisiana. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on this. But so because basketball is a both fall and spring sport, the NCAA says you have to have a 2.5 GPA or something like that in your fall semester. Okay. Ben Simmons knew he was going to enter the draft after the end of his first year, which means he did okay in the first 2 months of his fall semester, knew he could fail the rest of his tests for the fall semester, still have a 2.5, and then knew he didn't need to attend class for the entire rest of the spring. That's a culture problem.
So I agree with that. But I don't think that's necessarily the fault of the athlete, which is what I said to begin with.
Okay, sure.
I think it's the university. It goes back to the university, because the university makes that so.
Yes.
They basically say you can forfeit your education to come play sports for us because you bring in us a boatload of money.
Yeah.
College basketball and football are the two most. That is where a lot of those big colleges, such as Alabama and Duke, Louisiana, and all those, get a large majority of their funding from. Is their revenue that they generate based off of college basketball and football games, whether it be TV deals, ticket sales, merchandise, etc. And so these colleges are like, you can get basically whatever GPA you want as long as we're winning games. If we win the national championship, you can get whatever you want in economics class.
So that brings me back to I think I said it like at the beginning of the conversation, and this is why I don't think athletes should be paid by the schools. If you want to make money off your likeness, it's because schools are in the business. They are no longer in the education business.
Sure,
if the school's goal was to educate young people and not be the number one football program or by proxy make a bunch of money, then the school would care what these athletes got in class.
Sure, but I'm not saying the only problem with that is that I'm not saying that the schools should pay the athletes. I'm saying that the athletes should be allowed to get paid outside of that, and which
Sure.
was also not allowed. So the NCAA was the problem.
Yes.
It wasn't, and in
The governing
in
body
turn,
of
it was the
school
schools
sports.
telling the NCAA not to let student athletes get paid, but they were paying their athletes anyway, which was a problem. But they were only paying the athletes because the athletes wanted to get paid.
Sure.
If the athletes could go out and if Zion, I think, I'm not sure if this happened before Zion already entered the NBA, but Zion Williamson on the New Orleans Pelicans, for example. If Zion wants to go to college and approach Nike and be like, you guys can sell my likeness for a share of your profit, or an endorsement deal, he should be able to do that. And that was,
without a doubt,
that was what the NCAA was disallowing for so long, and that's why schools were having to go under the table in paying these athletes.
Right.
So I agree that they shouldn't necessarily be paid by a certain school. Like, there shouldn't be a competition like Alabama, I'll give you $500,000. Louisiana, I'll give you $550,000. I don't think that should be how it works, and I don't think that's how it will ever work. I just think that athletes should be allowed to profit off of their likeness. And they are now, which is fantastic, and I'm glad that they are now.
And so I agree with all of what you just said. I totally agree with all of what you just said. I am frustrated by the fact that schools are not in the education business.
I agree. I completely agree with that.
I
see now that it seems that this debate has definitely turned a lesson of a debate into more of a I completely agree. But doesn't that just go to show also that,
I think if you ask any student anywhere or recent grad, we're all pretty much on the same page.
I would agree with that, yeah.
I don't have a great solution. I think, public college being free, as long as you maintain some type of academic standard.
Exactly. Yeah, going back to what I had mentioned earlier, the initial policy, if I remember correctly, this is what I was hearing. My fall semester, it would be the fall semester of like my senior year of high school, was like, okay, by the time you graduate, Rhode Island College, URI, and CCRI will all allow you to attend for free through state-funded money as long as you maintain a 3.0 GPA, which is a B.
Average.
A B average.
Right, I'm saying a B means average work.
Right. Yes, well, slightly, sure. B could be described as slightly above average, whatever.
Sure.
And by the time I graduated, the policy was passed, and it was, you can go to CCRI free for 2 years. And then transfer those credits to a state-funded school and pay those schools. Or continue to go to CCRI and pay.
I'll tell you right now, I have a proposal for you. And President Joe Biden, if you're listening, I'm currently in Massachusetts. So if Senator Warren is listening, this is my proposal for you. My loan payment is $2,500 a month. Cancel my student debt, and I will pay $500 a month to a general public education fund that will fund University of Massachusetts for all students. Wouldn't even bother me at all. A third, if you gave me the option to pay a third of my student debt to a general education fund, without a doubt. Like Social Security, we're paying into Social Security.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think so is all of your loan debt at this point federal? Is it private?
Federal, because I'm waiting on the homies to come through with that forgiveness.
Right. So that's the thing. I think a problem with a lot of the people that have graduated somewhat recently, maybe within the last 5 to 8 years, since college has begun to get expensive, I think a problem that a lot of them are having, and I know that I've heard this from a few of our coworkers, is that they immediately transferred all of their federal
Yeah.
debt to private debt, and they refinanced it into
To
a
get a
private
lower
loan
rate. Yeah, to
to
get
get
a
a
lower
lower
rate.
rate. And now there's talk in the government to forgive federal debt, and they're like, "Where was this?"
Right. Right. So my personal plan is to give it until the midterm elections. That's 2 years, right?
Right.
Although we're, a couple months into the first one already.
All right.
If we can't, it seems to be that the Democrats are majority to be in favor of this, right? It seems to be their type of agenda.
Mm-hmm.
My personal view is after 2 years, if we can't get this done or passed, we meaning the Democrats, controlling all three parts of government. I'm sorry, controlling both the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, not the judicial branch. If that doesn't get done in 2 years, I'm going to refinance into a lower rate. I'm at like 7% right now, or 6.8% right now.
Yeah.
And we just got approved for a mortgage at 2.25% or something ridiculous. Like,
Right.
I mean, you guys are just taking advantage of me.
Yeah. I agree.
I'm tired of it.
Yeah, I'm getting federal loans and still taking out private student loans.
Ugh.
Yeah, to pay for my schooling, and even then, like, it's not as much as some of the other people are paying at my school because of the scholarships and stuff that I got.
Right.
Thankfully, if I hadn't gotten the scholarships, I would probably be at like URI right now, which is
Sure.
where I was probably going to go initially. But with the state-funded plan that they had in place, but then
They took it away.
Yeah, they took it away, and the prices ended up being almost the same between the school that I'm attending now and URI. So, I don't know. I would basically have half of my debt eliminated by federal debt being forgiven at this point. Whether I think they initially said something like crazy, like $20,000 or like $15,000. I don't think that's going to happen. I think if it does get passed, it'll be something more in single digit range, like probably like 5 to 7.5 thousand.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 at the max. But even then, that would, like I said, I think I'm not sure exactly what I'm even at right now because I prefer not to look at it. But I think that would forgive at least like 80 to 90% of my federal loan debt.
Yeah.
And it would just leave me with what I have in private loans.
All right, Dill. Wrapping up here. This is my question for you.
Sure.
10 years from now, 15 years from now, whatever it is, 20 years from now, you have a child. They're getting ready to go to college. Public school is still not free. What are you going to tell them? Say, go to college, go learn a trade, take online courses, teach yourself a skill, software development.
Mm-hmm.
What's your advice to them?
I think unless they're dead set on one of the professions that you had mentioned previously that almost in all cases require a college plus professional degree, I think that I would encourage them to explore their options. I wouldn't necessarily say don't go to college,
Sure.
because there are definitely people that go to college and have a good experience and get a good job afterwards because of it.
Yeah, social development and experience and all that kind of stuff.
I just don't think that there are enough people in the world that have been told you can do the same thing without going to college.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll tell my kids. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty much on board. For me, and I anticipate it was much for you. You've talked about it a little bit. Is not going to college was not an option.
Right.
What I think is interesting is the fact that we are considering making it an option for our kids, knowing what we know now.
Yeah.
That's the summary of the story for me.
Yeah.
All right. Great conversation with you. Looking forward to seeing this episode along with our final written piece coming out on SubjectMatters.substack.com. If you haven't subscribed, go there, subscribe. Check out the Cracked Gaming Pod on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Anything else?
just, if you disagree and you think that we're idiots,
Yeah.
make sure to let us know in the comments, and we'd love to
Yeah.
have a conversation about it. Let us know either in the comments on here, shoot us a message on one of our social media platforms. We encourage conversation. That's why we're doing this, really. Even though we didn't necessarily
Absolutely.
disagree on this topic, I'm sure there will be some in the future.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
if you're out there and you disagree and you think that the way that college is now is the way that it's supposed to be, let us know. We'd like to learn more about the other side of this argument.
Or if you have a better solution than what our two brains came up with.
Exactly, because we basically propose nothing besides problems.
All right, Dill. Awesome. Looking forward to next week, and we'll talk to you later.